"I will have your baby," she said, and the rancher took her away. The prairies stretched wide and bare, silent under a pale sky. Wind brushed the dry grass in long, whispering waves. A dirt road cut through the middle like an old scar, fading into the distance. It was morning, but the sun barely touched the ground, held back by a heavy greyness that clung to the land like old grief. Samuel Boone, a rancher with shoulders hardened by years of silence, rode alone. His horse, Clay, moved slow and steady. No rush. There never was. Not anymore. Boone's face was marked by sun and sorrow. A short beard hid his frown, but the lines under his eyes betrayed the weight of too many memories. He had built his ranch with his own hands after the war. No wife, no children. Just wooden fences, iron tools, and long stretches of silence that never talked back. He didn't like the town, didn't like people's eyes or their voices. But once a month, he made the ride down the hill, past the edge of the woods, crossed the empty railroad, and stopped by the last water pump before the road split west. This morning, something was different. Clay snorted and halted near the rusted pump. Boone narrowed his eyes. A thin blue shawl fluttered against the post. Something was huddled beside it. Someone. He climbed down, slow. His boots touched the gravel with a soft crunch. The wind picked up just a little. She was sitting with her knees pulled tight to her chest. A girl, no older than 20. Her dress was torn at the hem. Her bare feet were scratched from the road. Her dark hair was tangled, clinging to her face like she had slept in the dust. She wasn't crying, just staring straight ahead, as if her mind had left before her body. Boone didn't speak, just stood there. A small leather bag lay beside her. Empty. The pump behind her groaned, then fell quiet again. He watched the way she didn't move, and flinch at the sound. Her hands trembled slightly, but she kept them locked beneath her chin. Then he saw the blood. Dry, brown, along the side of her arm, smudged near her collar. Something had happened. She turned to him slowly, as if seeing a man for the first time. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Her eyes were not begging. They were warning. She didn't need saving. But she needed something. Boone looked down the road. No carriage, no rider, no sign of who left her there, or why. And still, she stared at him. The wind stopped. Clay stomped once. And without a word, Boone took off his coat and held it out. She didn't take the coat at first. Boone stood there, arm outstretched, his jaw locked in that way it always did when the silence became too loud. The wind had stopped. The world had stilled. Then, without looking at him, the girl reached out. Not boldly, not timidly, just slowly. Her fingers touched the wool, but it was as if she couldn't feel it. She wrapped it around her shoulders with one arm and kept the other close to her ribs, where the dried blood marked something deeper than just skin. Boone crouched beside her, not close, just near enough. He watched her blink once, then close her eyes for a long time. He didn't ask questions, didn't say, "Who did this?" or "Are you hurt?" He knew better. Some things take more than words to explain. He remembered another morning, years ago, a muddy battlefield, not far from here. A boy, just 17, had sat against a tree stump, eyes wide open, leg gone. Boone had given him his coat, too. The boy had died with it pulled up to his chin, whispering for a mother who would never come. Boone had told himself then, "You can't carry everyone." But here he was again. And this girl, she was still breathing. She looked up once, just briefly, and in her stare was something that caught him off guard. It wasn't fear. It was resignation, the kind of hollow surrender that didn't scream or cry, the kind that had been going on for years. Her silence wasn't new. It was practiced. He stood up slowly, looked at the road, Again. Still empty. His ranch was 2 hours north, up a path no one used except him. The cabin had 2 rooms, 1 bed, cold walls, a fireplace that hadn't been lit in days. No company, no visitors. Just clay, some chickens, and a barn that needed fixing. He didn't need this. She wasn't his to save. But then she did something unexpected. She leaned her head to the side and whispered, barely loud enough for the wind to carry it, "Don't leave me here." 3 words. No tears, no tone, just plain truth. Boone didn't move. Her hand slid toward the dirt, fingers digging into the gravel as if she expected to be dragged back, as if someone might return. He swallowed hard. She could lie. She could be trouble. She could ruin everything he had managed to keep still and quiet. But deep down, under the dust and blood, this girl reminded him of his sister. Long ago, before the war, back when the world still had softness. He saw her now. That young girl on their porch, crying the night their mother died. He hadn't known what to do then either. Had just held her hand and told her it would be all right. It hadn't been. But he remembered the weight of her hand in his, the way it had stilled him. He looked at this girl again. "All right," he said finally. She looked up. He didn't say more, just turned, walked to Clay, and untied the second stirrup. Then he came back, helped her to her feet, slow, steady. She winced, but said nothing. When she was finally up on the horse, she looked smaller than before. Boone mounted behind her, and together, without another word, they rode toward the hills. The road behind them stayed quiet. But something in Boone's chest had started to stir, like a locked door creaking open. Boone didn't ask anything until the second night. The girl hadn't spoken since that one whisper by the water pump. She slept on a pile of blankets near the fireplace, barely touched, did the stew he made, and flinched when the chickens clucked too loudly outside. Boone gave her space. He didn't hover. He'd lived long enough to know that some wounds didn't bleed on the outside. But that evening, as the fire cracked and rain tapped gently on the roof, she spoke. "I'm not supposed to be alive." Boone looked up from sharpening his knife. He didn't answer, just let the words land. "They gave me to a man, older, mean." Her voice was flat, like telling someone about the weather. Boone stopped moving the blade. "His sons hurt me." Her eyes were on the flame. "He found out. Got mad, I told. Said I was ruined. Worthless." She blinked slowly, as if fighting off sleep or memory. "He told them to get rid of me, like trash." Boone felt his jaw tighten. He didn't speak. She rubbed her wrist, where a red mark still bloomed. "One of the farmhands let me run. He tied a horse for me. Said he'd distract them. I don't know if he's alive." That explained the blood, the silence, the hollow look in her eyes. Boone didn't press her for names. He didn't need to. There weren't many ranches that rich and cruel within riding distance of his land, and only one had the kind of power to make people disappear without a single question being asked. The Danton family. He had heard of them, owned land beyond the river, thousands of acres, 3 sons, 1 widower patriarch, known for selling cattle and buying silence. Boone remembered a drifter once found near their fence line, shot in the back. Sheriff called it a theft gone wrong. Town never questioned it. And now, they'd be looking for her. Maybe not in town, not in daylight. But they'd come. He stood and went to the window. The rain blurred the fields, but his instincts were sharp, the kind that don't go dull after war. "We don't have much time," he muttered. She looked up. "You should have left me." He turned, His voice was even. I didn't. Her shoulders sank a little, not in defeat, but relief. That night, Boone saddled Clay in the dark. No lantern, no noise. He rode to the general store in town before dawn, didn't speak to anyone except the old shopkeep Earl, bought canned goods, bullets, and a second rifle, left without a word. But Earl was a mouth that never stayed shut. By dusk, the Dantons would know where the girl had gone, and they wouldn't come asking with kindness. Back at the cabin, Boone loaded both rifles. He taught her how to hold one, not shoot, just hold. Showed her where the safe corner was if someone broke in, where to hide, how to run. She listened. Every word. No fear in her face now, just something deeper. Resolve. Boone stood by the window that night, rifle across his chest. Every creak in the floorboards, every shift in the wind outside. He tracked it. She finally asked him, "Why are you helping me?" He didn't look away from the dark. Because someone has to. Mornings came quiet after that. The girl, whose name he still didn't ask, began feeding the hens. One hand out, slow, the way Boone did it. He watched from the porch, arms crossed, rifle still slung across his shoulder. She boiled water before he even lit the stove. She stitched the torn hem of her dress with a thread from an old feed bag, patched his ripped glove without saying a word. Boone, in return, taught her how to saddle Clay. The second morning, he handed her the small rifle. Her hands trembled. "Just hold it," he said softly. She did. Her grip was weak, but she didn't flinch this time. He moved behind her, adjusting her shoulders, setting her feet. He didn't touch her skin, just the fabric. Gave her space, but stood close enough so she knew he wouldn't leave. A soft click. She breathed out. Not a laugh. Not a sigh. Something in between. Later, she found an old can on the fence post and practiced aiming while he fixed the barn door. Still, they barely spoke. But the silence between them had changed. It wasn't empty anymore. That night, while boiling potatoes, she looked over at him. Really looked, Ked, and asked quietly, "What happened to your arm?" Boone paused. The fire popped. He rolled up his sleeve. A thick scar crossed the muscle, rough and deep like a lightning bolt carved into skin. "Bayonet," he said. She nodded like she already knew. "Did you kill him?" Boone stared at the wall for a long time. Had to. She didn't ask more. The next day she found an old leather-bound journal on the shelf and flipped through the blank pages. She began to write. Not sentences, just single words. Some crossed out, some rewritten again and again. "Forgive," one page read. "Safe," another. Boone didn't ask what they meant. On the fifth night, she sat near the fire and said, "My name's Clara." Boone nodded once. "Boone." She smiled. Not wide, not bright, but the kind of smile that hasn't been used in years and forgets how. "I used to want to be a teacher," she said, "before." He didn't ask what changed. He just said, "You still could." She looked down at her hands. "I don't think I can have dreams anymore." Boone stirred the stew. Dreams don't need permission. The wind rustled outside. Wolves howled far off, faint and low. She leaned back against the wall, watching the flames dance. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, "I'm not pregnant." Boone looked up. She stared at the fire. "I told them I was. It was the only way they'd stop." Boone didn't reply. His hand tightened slightly on the spoon. She swallowed. "I thought maybe if I said it, they'd let me be human again." Silence followed, thick, heavy. Then Boone stood and gently ladled soup into a bowl, walked it over, set it beside her. She looked up. He said, "You don't have to explain anything." Her eyes welled, not from sadness, from the shock of being believed. They didn't speak again that night, but she fell asleep on the chair, arms wrapped in his coat. And for the first time, Boone didn't stand watch by the wind. No. He sat near the fire, close enough to feel the warmth. There was still danger out there, but for now, inside this cabin, something real had begun to bloom. Not love, not yet, but something much quieter. Trust. They came at dawn. 3 riders, dark coats, dust trailing behind them like smoke from a funeral pyre. Boone saw them from the ridge. He had gone out early, checking the traps near the edge of the woods. When he spotted them, he froze, then slowly backed behind the trees. They weren't lost. They weren't neighbors. They were looking. He reached Clay fast, rode low, and returned to the cabin through the back trail. Clara was by the fire, stirring a pan of cornbread batter. "They're here," he said, low and steady. Her hands stilled. The wooden spoon trembled in the bowl. Boone handed her the rifle. "Go to the barn. Back corner. Stay there." Clara looked at him. "Boone." "Now." She obeyed. He locked the cabin door behind her, loaded the second rifle and placed it near the window. Then he waited. When the knock came, it wasn't a fist. It was the butt of a shotgun. 3 hard bangs. Boone opened the door slowly. The man in front had white hair and a face carved from stone. His coat was expensive. His eyes were colder than the wind. "Samuel Boone," he said. "You're housing something that belongs to me." Boone didn't answer. The second man, younger and thinner, stepped forward. "Girl, Clara. She ran from our ranch, took silver, lied about things." Boone's grip tightened on the doorframe. "I ain't here to argue," the older man said. "You hand her over, this ends easy." Boone said nothing. The third man pulled a pistol. "Want us to search?" Boone's voice came low, calm. "You step inside. Someone dies." A pause. The younger one sneered. "You'd die for a girl you just met?" Boone didn't blink. "I'd die to stop men like you." The old man gave a bitter smile. "You were a soldier, weren't you?" Boone stayed still. "Then you know what losing feels like." Boone's eyes narrowed. "And I know what cowards look like." Silence. Then a movement. Fast. The thin man tried to rush the door, but Boone fired once, missing on purpose, the shot cracking through the quiet morning. Chickens scattered, horses reared, smoke curled from the barrel. They backed off. "You fire again," the old man warned, "and we burn this place down, with her in it." That's when Clara stepped out of the barn, hair wild, eyes wide, rifle in hand. "Then you'll burn me," she shouted, "but you won't drag me back." They turned to her. The youngest raised his weapon, but Boone stepped between them. "No," he said. "She's free." "You protecting a thief?" The old man spat. Boone's voice broke slightly. "I'm protecting someone who's suffered enough." Clara moved beside him. "Tell them," she said quietly, looking the white-haired man in the eye. "Tell them I'm your son's child. Tell them I'm your grandchild." Boone turned sharply. The old man's eyes flinched, just for a moment. Clara's voice cracked. "You said I was trash, but your son, he made me, and you hid it." The younger man froze. The third man slowly lowered his weapon. Boone looked at the old man. "That true?" The old man stepped back. "She's lying." But no one believed him now. Boone cocked the rifle again. "I won't let her go," he said. The old man stared long and hard, then finally turned. "Let's go." They rode off without a shot fired. Boone stood still until the dust disappeared into the horizon. Clara leaned into him. He caught her, steady and firm. And in that stillness, something broke inside both of them. Not with noise, with quiet. The kind that meant everything. The sun stayed low that day. Grey light clung to the land, casting long shadows across the fields. Boone and Clara stood at the edge of the porch, watching the dust settle in the far distance. The Danton men were gone, swallowed by the trail they came from, but the weight of their presence still hung in the air, thick as smoke. Boone didn't move. He hadn't lowered his rifle. Clara sat down on the top step. Her hands were folded, resting on her lap, still trembling. Her hair clung to her cheeks. She didn't cry. Not anymore. There were no tears left, only breath and silence. Boone finally set the rifle against the door, walked to the barn, checked Clay's legs, brushed the dirt off the saddle with slow, careful strokes, the kind of movements a man makes when his heart is still running, even though the danger has passed. Inside the cabin, he poured water into the basin, washed his face, changed his shirt, cut into the bread she had baked that morning, even though it had gone cold. He didn't speak. She didn't ask. By nightfall, Clara lit a single candle and placed it on the windowsill. Boone sat by the fire, hands folded, eyes on the glow. Then she walked to him. He didn't look up right away, not until her shadow fell across his boots. "I lied to them," she said softly, "but not about everything." He met her eyes. "I did wish I was pregnant," she whispered. "Because then I wouldn't be alone. Then someone would need me." Boone didn't speak, just listened. She knelt down beside him. Her hand touched his. "I don't want to be needed anymore. I want to be chosen." Her voice cracked at the last word. He took a long breath, then gently placed his other hand over hers. Still, no words. The fire cracked once. Outside, the wind shifted. Later that night, Clara stood alone by the barn, her arms wrapped tight around herself. The moon hung low, yellow and wide like an eye that saw too much. In the grass behind her, a single wooden marker stood crooked. She had placed it there for the farmhand who helped her escape. She had carved a word into the wood with Boone's old knife. Mercy. Boone didn't interrupt her grief. He just watched from the porch, his hat in his hand, chest hollow. When she came back inside, she walked straight to him. "I don't want to run anymore," she said. "You're not," he replied. She stood still for a long time, then whispered, "Then let me stay." He nodded once, slow, steady. And that night, I didn't sleep in separate corners of the cabin. They didn't speak much either, just shared the silence like a blanket. No promises, no vows. Just two broken people, finally still, finally warm. The storm had passed. But its memory would linger, etched into every board of that cabin, every quiet glance, every breath between them. Outside, the wind whispered through the grass. Inside, for the first time in a long time, neither of them felt like they were waiting for something to go wrong. They were just there, together, alive. Spring came slow to the hills. The snow melted in patches, then streams, then soft rivers that fed the land. Green crept back into the earth, cautious and quiet, like a child returning after punishment. Wildflowers grew in places they never had before, by the fence post, beside the water barrel, even in the cracks of the front steps. Inside the cabin, things had changed. Not loudly, not all at once, but the stillness had softened. Clara hung new curtains from old cloth sacks. She planted herbs near the window, taught herself to mend the saddle, started writing again in the leather-bound journal. Boone, for his part, built a second chair beside the fire. He sharpened her kitchen knives and left fresh biscuits cooling each morning before heading out to the field. His steps were slower now, not because of age, but because there was something worth walking back to. They didn't speak of the Dantons again. The world beyond the ridge no longer held power here. Sometimes, Clara would sit on the porch as Boone worked in the barn. She'd press her palm to her belly, not with longing, but with peace. She didn't carry a child, but she carried a future, one that didn't require permission, one she chose. One morning, Boone came in early, smelling of soil and sunrise. He held out something wrapped in cloth. She opened it, a small wooden carving of a tree, rough, simple. The roots and branches were uneven, but in its shape was something unmistakable. It was growing. Clara looked at him. He didn't explain. He didn't need to. They buried it beside the